Alexis, and this is the Whatcha Watchin podcast. And today is going to be a really amazing episode because we're talking about one of my favorite things in the world, South Park. And I am joined by a very special guest. Angus Truskett from Hey Fam is here to talk all about South Park with me. Angus, thank you so much for being on the pod.
It is such an honor, Alexis. Thank you. You're in Colorado, right?
I am indeed. So extra South Park vibes.
Extra vibes. And I have a story. I'm not sure if you know that I was almost going to move to Colorado for like 1 or 2 years as a child.
Nice.
As South Park was at its fever pitch. So
you could have been an honorary Coloradan watching
literally,
South Park.
Yeah. I'll dive into that one a little later.
Nice. Well, I think, so today we're kind of getting together because the South Park movie recently celebrated its 25th anniversary. Both of us are huge South Park fans, like Matt and Trey fans from way back, all the little, Cannibal the musical, Orgasmo, all the things. So we'll just kind of begin with so what was your first experience with South Park, the show? When did you first watch it? What was that kind of, how did you get into it?
Cool. Okay. So in Australia, we have this, our TV, I'm going in the history of TV. Sorry, this sounds so broad, but we have free to air television. I don't think it's kind of borrowed from the English model of television. As you will probably learn in this chat, Australia is this bastardization of England and America, which is why I think we're very fond of South Park. But we have free to air television, one channel in particular. It's called SBS. It was a station started, I think, in the 80s stands for subtitled broadcasting services. So it was as Australia's immigration population grew, there was this channel devised. It's a government funded channel that would show a lot of international news in home languages, but they would also at evenings show a lot of cult stuff. So that's how I first saw something like Akira when I was 8 years old. You probably see behind me Neon Genesis Evangelion. That's how I became exposed to that. It was this amazing programming team, and because it's a government funded station, there's no TV commercials. So the only ads they would show is what's coming up later in the week. And I was watching it, I think at my neighbor's house. I was being babysat while my folks were out, which shows how young I was. I was probably, well, not babysat, I was 12. That sounds kind of lame. I was being looked after. And I just remember the screen, the disclaimer popped up. So I was immediately drawn. This was the ad. This wasn't the show. And it was the disclaimer. And that, as a kid, I really think disclaimers make me more interested in something than deter myself from it. I remember NBA Jam opening with a disclaimer about not doing drugs. I just remember being very fascinated with disclaimers. And then I think it was just it was mainly clips from Cartman has an anal probe, but also just season 1. I think it was the tail end of 1997 in Australia, December. I still remember. And it was Saturday, 8:30 p.m. the premiere of the most spoken about animated show in this year in America. And I was just transfixed with the animation, the violence, the swearing. I was this is amazing. I was 12, so this was so perfect. And then that same week, my neighborhood, which is a very small neighborhood, maybe similar to South Park, another reason why I felt very close to it. I grew up in a small coastal town on the east coast of Australia. And there was this annual Christmas party where all of the neighbors get together. And the family's house we're at had a son who was a year or two younger than me. And I remember the stress I had of wanting to tape this show at 8:30 at this where everyone was going to be really loud. And I just remember recording it and kind of watching it on a lower volume. And that VHS became this prized possession of mine. And it was from there on in, every Saturday, South Park. And I remember that next morning showing my dad, showing my mom, just showing anyone who would come over. I was just can you believe this? This is crazy. And, this was peak Simpsons era as well, and Beavis and Butthead. And I don't know, this just seemed so raw, so punky. It was who are these guys? And, they spoke me and my friends did. It was similar to, the only other time I had that feeling is watching Superbad, where you're somebody who is quite young wrote, or somebody who is actually writing, knows how people interact. And
it felt
from then on
real. Yeah,
100%. It was so absurd. It was so violent. One of the main characters died. I did not know at that first episode it was a recurring bit. But yeah, I was hook, line, and sinker. I learned a lot from that first episode. I learned what a dildo was. I remember asking my parents. But yeah, it was great. And it just, it was very punk, as lame as that sounds to say
but it's
as
so
a
true.
millennial.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's exactly what it was. a long time ago I did a video about like Beavis and Butthead and Ren and Stimpy and South Park, and it was like you mentioned the disclaimer. I like remember the disclaimer on Beavis and Butthead
I remember
like
yeah,
by heart. Yeah, and it's just one of those things
likewise.
where those disclaimers kind of made you like, ooh, this is going to be something good, like
Totally. Yeah.
it immediately makes you like, this is going to be something that's like a little bit edgy. And I feel like with South Park too, just even the animation style, like everything they were doing felt so different from
Yeah, I
what you
was like,
normally see.
you're like, oh, I could make this in my house. I mean, obviously it would take 6 months, but you just saw. I know, obviously, I think now we know the first episode is the only one that's truly handmade.
Totally.
It was just, it seemed so cut and paste and so juvenile that it made you feel like you could make it.
For sure.
But yeah, it was just this cool wave, I think, too, of like animators and writers who grew up with, Tex Avery and like Looney Tunes and cartoons of the 60s and 70s, and they were adults and they're like making their weird Gen X versions of those things, which are obviously inspired by that, but with far more. Yeah, it was just such a great era. Like,
Absolutely.
yeah, but South Park was the one for me. I was like, friendship ended with The Simpsons. Now South Park is my best friend.
Completely. Yeah, I remember so I grew up in Boulder, Colorado, and
Mhm,
our cable thing provider there did not carry Comedy Central. So it was
mhm.
one of those big things where it was like, here we are in Colorado, and like the main cable provider in Colorado doesn't carry a show where the main characters are in Colorado, and it's all in Colorado. There used to be this thing where at this big theater in our town, someone would like tape the show and bring the tapes and then play it at the
Oh,
theater there. And then you would go to the theater and watch it, and they'd be like, call the cable company, tell them you want Comedy Central. Like, this is the opportunity. This is what you're missing out on. So everybody would go and call the cable company after that. And I just remember, like, I went there. I think my mom took me, which is so funny thinking about it. But my mom was always into like stuff like this. My mom's like, humor above all things. I don't care if it's inappropriate. And so she took me, and it was like, yeah, there's this animated thing that, people are really into. We should go check it out. And I remember, like, I think the first episode I watched was the Halloween episode, and they did
mhm.
like a thriller parody with Chef, and I was
That's
just like,
right.
oh my god, it was like that
And that's when
scene.
Kenny's dead and they're like wins best costume because he's like
Totally,
rotting
yeah,
and
because
stuff,
he's like
right?
a
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
zombie. It felt
Everyone's
like
Chewbacca. Yeah.
totally. It felt like that like in Avatar when they plug into the banshees and they're like, oh,
Yeah.
like that
Yeah,
was
yeah,
me
yeah.
watching South Park, where I was like, holy shit, like it was just like it was everything I wanted. And I'm with you where like The Simpsons after that, I was like, no, I can't. Like The Simpsons just doesn't do it for me in the same way anymore.
Yeah, it just felt far more. I mean, even before the emphasis on the tight turnaround of the writing, it just obviously for me, it felt far more timely and just
For
like
sure.
it felt like like seeing a daily like political cartoon in a newspaper. Like it was quite
Absolutely.
current and it was very reactive, and for me, that worked in my favor. Despite like it obviously I think became far more reactive, not in a bad way as the show went on. But yeah, it just felt far more of the moment. And then, you learn about like the 2-year production pipeline of like Simpsons episodes. And that's why they might feel either more timeless, sorry, or outdated. But yeah, I just loved it. I love that your theater show. That's like, that
Yeah,
itself is very, like, that just wouldn't happen now because people
totally.
would,
It would
watch it
just
on
be like
TikTok or
online.
something.
You'd get it in little chunks on TikTok, and you'd be like,
Yeah,
wow, okay. Like you'd have no idea sort of how the pieces all connected. But it was crazy to
totally.
be like, the first time I saw South Park was basically in like a movie theater experience.
It's,
Just-
again, probably something we will say a lot. It was very South Park. I
yeah,
think
it's
there's
so
a South
true.
Parkness to that. I
So
then
true.
like was so obsessed that I would tape every episode, but I would design VHS covers with
Oh,
like I'd make
nice.
art on like the whatever the Mac version of Microsoft Paint was back then, and then like episode descriptions, and each week would print out a new cover to update the episode. It was insane, and it was like I remember super gluing VHS covers together to make my own box sets. Like it was insane stuff, but I loved it. I was so enamored by it. I loved the design too. Just they had circles, and I was really inspired by how differentiation between characters and celebrities and stuff. You could tell when it was like a celebrity impersonating, like as someone being on the show, or like just from using circles. I thought that was so cool, and like you could make yourself. I remember like and then in high school we're all like drawing ourselves or friends. So it was just such a very easy to replicate design that was really, I don't know, it was like, I felt it was just like, it really took over my life
Yeah, it's such an
for
interesting
years.
like combination of like, because the style is so simplified, the jokes can really be like the focus of it. And I think that's such
Exactly.
a cool thing. It's like, I know like Rick and Morty or, Family Guy or whatever. Like there are shows that are like better animated, but I just feel like none of the shows have the same level of jokes. And in a way, it's like because the animation is so simplified, like the humor has to come from
Exactly.
the jokes and the writing. And I think like that's,
Yeah, and you can. There's leniency too. And I know Matt and Trey have said this. It's like they're 8-year-olds. Like
Mhm.
there's this very juvenile design and crude design that you're far more lenient
So
for
true.
certain things that are said, and you're like, oh, these are kids. Like I said messed up stuff when I was a kid, and
So
I still
true.
do to a and like if you make it come from a cute little big-eyed kid, it's much more easy to swallow.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. When you can be like, well, they're kids. They don't know any better. They're just little
Totally.
assholes. They're just like, they don't know
Yeah.
anything. It's like, oh, you could just dismiss anything so much easier. And I think like that's been such a strength of South Park for sure for all these years
Oh,
where it's like,
totally. Yeah.
you can present something as like they're kids so they don't understand like how this works or why this works this way. And that can be
Yeah.
such a great way to make a commentary on whatever that thing is that you're trying to tackle. Then they decided they were going to do a movie. And I know
Yeah,
like
like
Trey
what
and Matt have
two
said all that
seasons
stuff about,
in,
yeah,
right?
it was pretty early. And I remember
It was
they
before season
thought,
3. It was like between
yeah,
2 and 3, I think, which
yeah.
is unheard of. Like
They
we'd
were
have
like, oh, we're not going to be able to, like, the show will get canceled. So we might as well do a movie now and like cash in on it while we can.
it's insane to think. And then, at that point the Simpsons had been around for maybe 15 years almost, and still no sign of a film. But yeah, 2 years, it was like, yeah, very indicative of, and this is pre-streaming too. Like this is theatrical release. This isn't like straight to DVD. It's crazy when you think about it. Like it's
Oh,
insane.
completely. Yeah. It's so wild that they did that. And then, of course,
And the
because it's
best year of
Trey, it's a
cinema,
musical.
99.
I know,
Of
right?
course.
For all the
Yeah.
things to happen in 99. And then, of course, that's also when the South Park movie happened. Like
Incredible.
the magical year of movies,
Insane. And
completely.
yeah, of course. I mean, I'd at that point had already, and I'm sure you had too. I'd seen Cannibal by that point. I'd seen Orgasmo, and I believe Basketball was probably out by then. Obviously,
Yeah,
not
I think
made by then.
basketball was like maybe what 98 or something, but baseball was right
Yeah,
around there. Yeah.
they were like, upon reflection, just incredible at saying yes to stuff. Like
Yeah.
not knowing that the longevity of their careers. Like
So
kudos to
true.
them. But yeah, I remember being very very in love with Cannibal, and maybe my friends didn't get that one as much as I did, and but just like renting it constantly from a video store that I actually ended up working at it a few years later, but wearing that out and just being hyper obsessed with anything they did.
Oh, completely. Yeah. Cannibal was one of those ones where, like, I feel like it's almost like you have to have watched it a certain period of time because I feel like people watch it now and they're like, well, this isn't that great. It's like, yeah, but that's not the point. Like,
Yeah,
it's
it's
the
the
point
vision.
is,
Like
yeah,
you can see
exactly.
you can see the Book of Mormon in
Oh,
Cannibal. Like
completely.
it's
It's like the
there. Like
prototype.
it's
Yeah.
100%. It's like when you see like THX 1138 or whatever, like an old student film, and then you see Star Wars, and you're like, oh yeah, the DNA is there. It's just the vision is there. The budget
Completely.
perhaps not. But yeah, it's such a it's such an absurd film. Just the history. What is it? The only recorded history of cannibalism in
Yeah.
the States or something, and just turned into like so hyper specific and strange. And this like great amalgamation of like Monty Python sensibilities that like an unabashed love for Broadway musical, which is such this like thing that is such a constant from South Park. Like this kind of, we can make fun of so much stuff, and they even have parodied Broadway musicals. There've been punchlines, but there's this undying love for them, which is very like, it's very wholesome, which is
Yeah.
funny amidst
I
all the
think
like
like
chaos of South Park.
Trey's like the musical ability that he brings to things, and I love that like how he deals with things is like just writing a musical. Like I love that Cannibal is basically like a breakup musical. Like there's so many things with it where you're like, I like
That's
that.
right, Leanne, right?
Yeah,
Wasn't it?
exactly. Leanne.
Yeah, I mean, you can go to therapy or name the slutty mother after your ex-girlfriend and write a musical about her.
Dudes will go on to win 9 Tonys instead of going to therapy.
Legitimately, yeah, I get it.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, and I love that that's like how they want to do all these projects. And like, it's just the kind of thing, well, like where Trey will be like, well, of course I'm going to write a song for it. And it's like, I love that that becomes a thing because the songs are so good. And I think that was one of the huge strengths with the South Park movie. Like, you know, Cannibal, obviously, like I have such love in my heart for that movie. Like the story is so quintessentially Colorado. There's a at CU Boulder, the sort of student cafeteria is called the Alfred Packer Grill. So like,
really,
yeah, it's very like
that's so crazy.
it's such a perfectly Colorado story. And then for them to take that and be like, and it's a musical, and it's about Trey breaking up with his ex-fiance, and it's about, you know, it's like, I love that. And then when you get to the South Park movie, it's like you get where they're teaming up with like Mark Shaman, and it becomes this like, okay, we're like really writing, like this is a legitimate musical. And at that time, I mean, it's 1999, The Matrix is coming out. People are not watching musicals, but it's like, this is what they're doing. And I love the commitment to like, we're doing that. It's a musical. We're going to write a whole thing. The intro song is very like classic musical.
Classic, yeah.
It's so
town.
Fantastic.
You know what? I think I had, so this is like a year after their first South Park album, the Chef Aid album, which I coveted and loved and would have my Discman and learned every song and off by heart and was exposed to so much music that, you know, I didn't know about The Clash then. And so there's like Joe Strummer, it's such a great record. And like, again, insane that that's after 2 seasons, like, oh, not even like halfway through season 2, pulling together all of their influences. And again, it's like getting Robert Smith in season 1. Like they're so lucky that they really just took every opportunity. But then I think in Australia, the soundtrack for Bigger, Longer, Uncut maybe came out a week before the film did, which was kind of very common of the time, to the point where maybe a month earlier, the Phantom Menace soundtrack also was released early, and it like mentions one of the
spoiler
deaths, the Qui-Gon. Yeah, so it was very common. But I remember basically knowing the songs. I'm pretty sure that was the order. I'm pretty sure I knew the songs before I saw the film. Maybe, yeah, I think it did come out. And I remember like, oh, so that's how Uncle Fucker is presented. It's like they're watching it. Like I was trying to figure out the plot of the film from the soundtrack. Which,
how funny. Trying to like decipher it from there.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's what happened. Yeah.
That's so cool. Yeah, I told a story on my TikTok about it, like when the movie came out here, because that was like, you know what, like 2 months after Columbine, and they were being so insane about like R-rated movies. That was when at the time they were like, oh, R-rated movies are certainly the cause of all violence. So they were being really, really strict about letting people see this movie. Like, so I remember when I went to see it, I was too young to buy tickets for it because they were making it, you had to be 17. And I was like, not
17.
old enough to buy it. So my friends and I made fake IDs to go buy it,
That's
like
insane.
to go buy the tickets. And it was so funny. Like it was just the stupidest thing. We didn't try to make like actual passable. We had student ID cards. And we were like, we're going to make these student ID cards and we're just going to like change it a few years and make it seem like we're 17. And like, when I think about it, I'm like, no one gave a shit. I'm sure the theater people, like if they were like, are you 17? And we were like, yeah, they'd be like, okay. Cause they were probably also 17, you know, but we had to do this whole elaborate scheme to go in, which I feel like is so bizarrely meta in the sense of like the entire movie is about them sneaking into the movie. And here we are being like, let's sneak into the South Park movie. And like, that was how we ended up seeing it. And then we ended up seeing it a bajillion times like that, to the point where by the end of it, we had all the songs memorized. And of course we had the CD and we listened to it all the time. We were like so obsessed with it constantly. It was great.
I, funnily enough, have like exactly the same story, because it was, we have a rating here called MA, and I was obviously aware because of internet and trailers and NC-17 and all these US ratings, but you know, we had MA, and that's 15 plus. And in 99, I was 14. And so just like you, my friends and I went, and we had to get somebody to buy a ticket, and then walking in and seeing that happen 15 minutes later was crazy.
It's such a bizarre thing.
And it's just like, again, you're like, going back to what I said before, you're like, oh, this is written by people who were young not that long ago. Like, This is such a, it was so cool. And I was like, oh yeah, they're literally me. Like, such an awesome experience. I don't think I've ever been seen as much in a film so fast than that. Yeah,
it's so accurate. It's like, holy shit, you guys created a movie where people in the movie are doing what so many people in the theater watching the movie are doing to be able to see this movie. It was so great.
So good. You saw it a bunch of times at the cinema when it first came out? Is that what you were saying?
Yeah, basically I did that. And then when it hit DVD, I actually did not, like, I got a DVD player, and the first DVD that I ever bought was the South Park movie.
Oh, that's amazing. It was delayed in Australia. So you couldn't buy it, and we had like really archaic like ratings. I remember video games were a big deal here. They didn't have like an R rating for video games, so a lot of games were banned in Australia, which is so stupid. But same with that film, and I remember having to buy an ex rental VHS of it to enjoy it until it was released. Like this bare bones version, which I ended up ordering like a Region One US version, but I had a bootleg tape, and I had a VHS of it, the film, which was a cam version, and I still associate when I watched it many years later, like scenes with like people like I just sounds that sounded different, or maybe I was like blown away by the clarity. But I remember, I think it was on a VCD, which back then could only fit, it was like a precursor to DVD. You couldn't fit much data on each side, so there was always like, it was like a laser disc. You had to flip it, not really, but like metaphorically. So it would always have a halfway point. I remember it was the hell scene was like it would cut. I remember something like that. I have fond memories of just watching it and like learning it, and like just I was hyper obsessed with that film.
That's so funny to be like, well, this is the part where at some point in the theater somebody coughs and stuff. I love the idea of like a bootleg being like, the main version that you watch over and over, to where now when you watch the real version, you're like, yeah, but this is like, that guy doesn't stand up and walk in front of the camera in this part.
Literally,
so,
I think I've definitely watched the bootleg more than I have the like official version.
That's so funny. I feel like I'm like that with the Cannibal commentary. Like I feel like I've watched Cannibal with the drunken commentary track probably way more times than I've watched Cannibal, like actual Cannibal. And it's so funny. Now when I watch it, I'm like, that's that scene where Trey talked about how, he's worth $7 million or something.
I remember that. I remember that moment. That's hilarious.
And then, of course, the Oscars. I mean, like, that's like, this is like, when you think about the journey of this show, like, how insane is this? Where it's like, so fast. And then they do this, they get nominated for an Oscar. Robin Williams performs fucking Blame Canada.
Yeah.
What? And then they go to the Oscars and the dresses on acid. Like, what an insane
J-Lo
series of events.
Gwyneth Paltrow, was it? It was like Paltrow and yeah. Iconic, incredible.
It's so weird. They had, there was maybe like 2 years ago or a year ago, there was a thing here where they were doing a little touring some South Park stuff around, and they brought it here, and it was in Denver, and I got a chance to see the dresses, and they were like, these are the actual dresses that they wore, which was just again, it's like, what a weird period of time that this is something that they did,
It's so good. It's so good. Yeah.
That getting nominated for an Oscar. And then I think that was because Phil Collins, I think, ended up winning for
Tarzan.
It's funny because I have so many friends who are like, oh, that Tarzan soundtrack and Tarzan's so amazing. And I'm like, to this day, I have not seen this movie and I have not listened to the soundtrack because of that. Because I am loyal.
100%. You know what? I was listening to a podcast this week, and it was Bret Easton Ellis, so like an author, and he has a lot of audience Q&As, and someone was like asking about music, and he's like, oh yeah, Phil Collins, Tarzan, still I think the last great song he wrote is on that, and I'm just like, I'm never going to listen to it.
Right?
Like,
I can't do it. Like
Matt
on principle.
Yeah.
Exactly. Like I'm ride or die. I cannot go back. I can't I'm sorry. I'm sure it's great. I'm sure it's lovely music, but like, it's not better than Blame Canada. Exactly.
Robin Williams did not perform it. Like, iconic shit.
The musical journey of these guys from that through to Book of Mormon is so wild. Because I think when you watch that, at the time, them being nominated for an Oscar was kind of like, yeah, okay, whatever. I'm so sure. And then to have cut to them winning all these Tonys and being well regarded, that's so, what a bizarre trajectory, what a thing to achieve. And I feel like that's also feels very Trey, the fact that he does half of this shit for spite. And then it's oops, you won 9 Tonys for spite, basically. That's so funny.
Totally. And you got to think the Andrew Lloyd Webbers and stuff just being these, it's just when they disrupted television and comedy.
Totally.
It's the same thing. They did the same with, Tonys and Broadway and stuff. It's amazing.
Completely.
Did you ever play any of the games?
Yeah, there was that one that was really the first one I think they made where you had to shoot turkeys or something. And it was the graphics were really 64. Bad. Yeah, it was it was one of those things where it was clearly they weren't quite, it was not ready for prime time. They totally had it, but they didn't really know what they wanted to do with it. And then, of course, Stick of Truth obsessed. And all that. Yeah.
Totally. Yeah, you'd piss on Snowball. It was the first person shooter. And I remember they recorded like a bunch of lines for it. And just to me, it was like, oh my God, South Park in 3D. My like 14-year-old brain was
Totally.
so enamored by it. Yeah. And it was on Nintendo 64. I remember having to get like the expansion pack to like up the graphics, and it was amazing. And it was a dog shit game. It was like not good at all.
But it was
But
so
I
cool to hear
remember
them like in a game and like original
totally.
stuff, you
I
know?
can still see the character selection screen where like each character is like asking you to pick them and stuff. It was amazing. It blew my mind. And I
Nice.
remember there was like a trivia game on PlayStation One, a chef, which was like even worse. It was
Oh
like a chef
yeah.
ran trivia game, but then
Right.
they really, I think, uh, took the feedback, or were like we need to, really, they're gamers themselves. So I think they obviously were like,
Yeah.
these are not good. And then they took their time, and then we had Stick of Truth and
Yeah.
Fractured Butthole, which was like an incredible, like they were that rare thing where it's a licensed game that was actually like really, really great, and like
Totally.
really a valuable asset to that genre, like the RPG genre. Like it was so well made. I
For
love those
sure.
games. They're
Oh, me
amazing.
too. They're so genuinely funny, and like even character customization, where you're the difficulty level is like the darker your skin tone is, the more it's like increased difficulty. Like that's so funny. I
Or like
love
you're
that.
like mage, warrior, or Jew or something. It's
Yes,
just like
totally.
you can. It's just the same. And they always said it's like those games were like. I remember for Stick of Truth, they were like, oh, or even both, they're like, we consider this like almost a season of the show, like the amount of
Completely.
writing, the amount of recording, the amount of animation. But yeah, it was like
Absolutely.
that. I don't think there is a better licensed video game.
Yeah.
There are games where like they're set within universes, and you play a made up character who somehow from very far away interacts with the main story you might know, but to put you right in there and have you as a new kid, like it was so cool. Did your
Uh,
friends get into it as much as you? Like, or were you
yeah,
kind of an outlier?
I
Yeah, that's
remember
cool.
like in school, I think part of it too is the Colorado thing. Like, I think just the fact
Of
that we were
course.
all like, shitty Colorado teenagers who like, here's a
Yeah.
show that feels very like it's made for us type of thing. So I think we all really got into that. But it was one of those things where I just like, it clicked for me and I just never, I was like, this is me from now on. And I think a lot of my friends were like into it. And then maybe some of them got into like Family Guy or something later. But I was always like, no, this is like, one of the like tenets of my life is going to be South Park, and I just have
I'm the
been
same
into it
as you. I
forever.
remember Friends, at the start, the first few seasons, because it was obviously like flavor of the month or whatever.
Mhm.
And just then people dropping off, as people do, which is, when hype or, you stop being on the cover of magazines and movies stop coming out, people die off. But I remember just never wavering and being, and it's an often said phrase where you're like, oh, it's actually kind of like, it's probably the strongest it's been the more that show goes on. You know what I mean? Like it's one of the rare shows where I think it actually totally improves as it goes on. Not to actually, not to discount the earlier seasons, but especially 2 and 3, you can see how split they are between developing the film and writing the episodes. And I think they've admitted that. But yeah, it just, I've never wavered. I am a little behind though, which sucks. I haven't seen all of the specials yet. I don't know why. Like they did the COVID special, then they did the vaccination special, and then the Q and I remember I've seen all those. I haven't. I think streaming wars is the one I haven't seen yet, which I've got
Yeah.
to get into.
Streaming Wars, and then the new one that was like maybe last month or whatever. But it is
That's
weird
right,
because it
the
feels
Ozempic one. I
so,
mean, I've seen half
yeah,
of it via osmosis, obviously, like the Lizzo bits and stuff like that. So I,
totally.
I just need to see it. Yeah, I have laxed. Forgive me, Father. I have lapsed. Sorry. Yeah, I feel bad about that.
I really like the specials. I think they're really good. I love when they do a season. I think they've worked out a situation where they could basically do like 10 episodes every year, maybe every 2 years, maybe every 3 years, whenever they feel like it. And in a way, it's like it's great because they just like if they don't have anything to say, they don't have to do it.
They don't do it.
You know?
It's like I mean, obviously this show isn't as of it's it doesn't commentate as much, but it's like Larry David's situation with Curb,
Yeah,
where he can take like 2 years off or 5 years off, or I think it was like 8 years off, and it's just like when the jokes come or the create like such
exactly.
a very rare instance to be. And I do think someone like Larry David and Matt and Trey, while wildly different in their humor and stuff, are very similar creatives where like they have
Hmm.
a love for like classic comedy, and you can see the inspirations of like even with Curb, like Marx Brothers or very traditional
Totally.
vaudeville stuff, but just through this modern lens, and they kind of just have unparalleled love and like respect of their peers for
Yeah.
just being them. And yeah, just I love that these types of creators can take their shots. Do you have a
Completely.
favorite scene in the movie, or like what's something that you loved? Why do you think the South Park movie, I don't know why I'm interviewing you now, why do you think the South Park movie is so successful where so many other films that transition from a TV series to a feature film fail? Why do you think, as a,
I mean,
someone who watches
yeah.
watches films for a living, why do you think this one has like
I mean,
so
I
much
think like
respect? And
it is sort of what you mentioned, like the creative aspect. Like I think they basically just, to me, it's like they don't ever do anything like they don't seem like commercially motivated. You know what I mean? They don't seem like there's no like focus group. There's no like, oh, well, we have to hit 4 quadrants. Like they don't, I just think they're like, we just want to make shit that we think is funny. And to me, like that's always the content that I respect the most, be it like a YouTuber or like a podcast or a TV show or a movie. Like I love when creative people are like, yeah, I'm doing this because this is what I think is going to work. Like this is what I like and this is what I want to put out there, as opposed to kind of like, these are the beats we have to hit. These are the check boxes we have to check, you know, like, and I get the sense with the South Park movie that it's like, again, like it's going to be a musical. It's going to be like, you know, about how the parents hate Terrence and Phillip. It's going to be a commentary on what they've been going through for the past couple of years of making South Park and everyone being like, this is dangerous for children. And, you know, like I love that. I think that's a huge reason to me why it connects versus something like the Simpsons movie, which has like, you know, moments or whatever that are kind of memorable, but overall
but it just feels like 3 episodes stitched together, you know?
Exactly.
Yeah, South, it just feels, it's exactly right. Like it's like they never take the easy way out, and as I find, like it would be very easy for them to stitch 3 episode ideas or stretch one episode to across 90 minutes. But the challenge that they set themselves while having like the most discussed hot button topic TV show all the time, but then create a musical, you know, like an Oklahoma style musical, but then also have like war and just the giant social commentary. It doesn't seem like the easy way out, and it's such a cinematic experience too. You know, never once while you're watching it are you confusing it for watching South Park, the TV series. Like it is this grand cinematic, even from removing the censors, from when they swear to like the advance in animation while it still does look crude. Like it's just, yeah, it's so cool that that you know, again, that scratches such a certain itch I have of mine, where you can tell those guys are film fans and they're like, we're going to make a film, not an extended TV episode. And it's why no one talks about, you know, other like Beavis and Butthead to America in the same, which isn't a bad film, but it's not used in the same sentence as, you know, South Park, Bigger, Longer, and Uncut. And I'm so glad they didn't really feel the need to do another like motion picture. Yes, they've done extended episodes like the Imagination Land. I know was kind of a stitched together arc and stuff, but it's so cool that they've just got this. Yeah, we did the film. Cool. On to the next thing. Like it's,
and I think
awesome.
Part of it too.
It's incredible.
They always talk about how much they hate doing a movie. Like they're always like, they get the idea to do a movie, and then in the middle of doing the movie, they're like, let's never do a movie again. And I know they had that with Team America a lot too. So yeah, I think they kind of just like,
and again, Team America, like the hardest way possible to maybe make that film.
Oh, completely.
Like, I know it was inspired by what they saw a script for The Day After Tomorrow or something. And,
yeah, something like that.
They were accidentally, maybe they were censored by accident, or it was floating around the backlot where they were, and they were like, this movie is like fucking stupid. Let's make it with
like,
puppets.
Let's do something stupid
to...
and with puppets.
Yeah, and again, they make it so much harder. But again, it's like Team America is. You know, Team America is one of those movies I know where people like quote it without having watched it. It's
totally.
It's for a film that's like a one singular product, like not a TV series or anything else, just a singular film. That film is quoted by so many people, from like Kim Jong Il stuff to America Fuck Yeah. Like it's insane the breadth of that film. And
so true.
Again, a masterpiece. Like an absolute I love that film. I remember actually the first time I went to the States in 2005, like maybe the second or third thing I did was rush to like a Virgin megastore in Times Square to buy the unrated DVD because it was unavailable in Australia, and I was like, I need that sex scene.
I gotta have this with the full sex scene that's just like so insane. I love
the scat scene and the kissing and stuff. Yeah.
I also love the idea too. Like this is again where I say like the fact that these guys are so motivated by spite. So like the idea of like, you know, the MPAA telling them you have to change this and then being like, let's make it 10 times worse just so they have to sit through it. Like that's the punk rock vibe, you know what I mean? That's the idea of like they're going for their creative vision and they will just like destroy anybody who like fucks with it. And I love that. I have so much respect for that. As I mean, we're like essentially they're fighting with a professional organization over like a puppet sex scene, and they understand how ridiculous that is. So they're gonna really make it ridiculous, you know? So it's like I have so much respect for that sort of fuck you attitude that they have. That it's like
I also think
my
the
favorite.
film just altered the course too of Matt Damon's career, like forever. Like without if that puppet didn't turn out looking like that for when they, you know, then wrote the joke around how it looked, I think his career would be in a really different place. It's like that movie is insanely, you know, a turning point for so many people. Do you have a favorite scene or like quote or something that you think about intrinsically when you hear like about the South Park film? Or is there somewhere that
I think like, you know, I mean, there's a bunch of songs that I think of usually. I think of Blame Canada all the time, but I think of that La Resistance medley like all the time. That to me is one of those
all the
things
songs come together.
Yeah. When I was sitting, when I saw the Book of Mormon, and it was so cool. I got to see the Book of Mormon in Denver on opening night, and Trey was there. It was so cool. He was just like walking around outside the theater, and I saw him, and I was like, holy shit, that's Trey. And he was just like in like a Broncos t-shirt hanging out. And I was like, can I get a picture with you? He's like, sure, dude. And I was like, like it was so wild to be like, I'm going in to see the Book of Mormon and fucking Trey's just like standing here. So that was insane. Unreal. And I remember while watching the Book of Mormon, just thinking like, God, this is so incredible. And thinking back to that La Resistance medley and being like, this is like the seed of all this. This is like where this all started. And it's just like, that was, and even rewatching it in the sing-along one recently, like that was what blew my mind, was just thinking about like watching this, like the creative process, watching them grow as creators and like as writers and as, you know, like lyricists and all this, like watching them grow over 26 years, like for this it's such a bizarre thing, because I can't think of any other thing that I love that I have been able to watch for, you know, more than 2 decades and see like every step in the evolution of that thing, you know?
It's corny, but it's like it's grown alongside us, you know what I mean? And it's insane that this partnership has lasted this long. Like, you know, Matt hasn't left or Trey hasn't left and done their own things. Like they have this outlet, which is South Park, and then that is such a, you know, generator of like goodwill, and it's so popular and so famous still that it allows these other opportunities. And it's so rare. Like you know, I mentioned Seinfeld earlier. That show did you know, Larry left towards the end. Like these partnerships don't last as, it's very rare. Like the Simpsons writing staff are younger than, you know, they weren't around when the Simpsons started. Like
it just like cycles out.
So yeah, so it's really rare to have this, like, and how rare is it too? I know I'm not a fan by any, like, and this isn't shade, sorry, Seth MacFarlane heads, but I'm not a fan. But I know that he is hands-on with his series, but it's like, it is that's such a rare thing, like to have, you know, Matt and Trey be so hands-on. 25, 26 seasons in, and it's not like, we sold the IP and we're like, you know, living large in Malibu mansions, which they probably are.
Which they totally could, And I love that they didn't, you know, it's this thing that you can tell that they love making it, and that it's something where I think they look at it too as like, when we have something to say, this is the means we use to say the thing. So we're keeping it because we want to still be able to say what we want there. And they've carved out such a little path for themselves where, you know, Comedy Central will let them do whatever. And, you know, like, I just think like they have earned it in such a way. It's like you mentioned with Curb, you know, like Larry David has earned the ability to be like, I'm going to do whatever I want on here. And I love that Trey and Matt have also earned that ability to be like, we know what we're doing. This is what we want to do. Clear it with standards and practices. We're doing this, you know, I just,
very similar
to
the Matt and Trey. I was just thinking the like Curb finale, you know, have you seen the final season?
I need to still.
Of Curb?
It's so bad.
Oh, okay. Oh, wait. Well, you know how he copped a lot of flack for the Seinfeld finale?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And for years, people have made like, the worst finale ever. He essentially recreates the finale of Seinfeld. He's like, I'm giving it to you again because you hated it so much.
So good.
And it's awesome. That's such a, like a not, you know, like spite-fueled creative decision, which I can get behind. Are there any bits? I haven't watched the movie recently, but was there any bit when you went to the sing-along and you had that like, this didn't age well, which I've never had with South Park per se, because of like it's its very essence is about not aging well, maybe, or maybe aging too well. Was there anything that stood out that didn't play as well as someone who's seen it recently?
Yeah, I mean, like, weirdly enough, I feel like it all kind of worked. There was some of the like Satan and Saddam stuff that I kind of had forgotten a little bit about, and that, of course, is like not timely now, but they're like,
The death, yeah.
yeah, exactly. But for the most part, it was just one of those things where I think I was just kind of surprised at like, wow, you could release this movie right now if you wanted to, like it just felt very much like, and I think that there is
That's so
like a sort
good.
of timeless quality, even though South Park is very like timely in terms of like the episodes tend to be about like,
Mm,
especially now with the 6-day turnaround of like current events.
mhm.
I think like the way that those ideas are presented, especially with the framing of like, it's these kids dealing with whatever the thing is, does kind of give it like a timeless, relatable quality where you like, obviously there are some episodes that are like specific about like fads or whatever at the time, or, when the boys wanted a Sega Dreamcast or these different things,
Yeah.
like, but it's like, there's
Yeah.
always still, whether it's a Sega Dreamcast or a PS5 or whatever, it's like, it's still like, there are still common like themes that make it so relatable. And I think that's a
That's
huge
right.
part of
Kids
the
will always
staying
want the
power.
latest video game console.
Exactly.
Parents will always, well, some parents will always try to censor, will overreact to
Mhm.
cartoons. Yeah, it's timeless stuff.
Totally. Totally. Awesome. Well, Angus, this has been great. And I'm sure,
It's been
if
fantastic.
next time there's like a South Park special or something, I'm sure we can hop on
Please.
back and do this. And if ever you're in
Yeah.
Colorado, I got my Casa Bonita shirt on.
I know,
If
I
ever
gotta
you're
go.
around, you got to come down here.
I gotta
Had the
go.
opportunity to go. It was so fucking awesome. I went a
It's
bajillion
amazing.
years ago
Again,
when it was
speaking
shitty.
about,
And now I went again now that they have it. And it's so nice now. It's cleaner and even better. So.
that's so good. And speaking about, them using money for ways that most other elites would balk at, like that's one of the greatest points, like resurrecting Casa
Totally.
Bonita and hiring all these people to work. Like that's insane. That's so
It's
cool.
so true. It's
How
like
far is it
borderline
from where you live?
philanthropy. Not very far. It's like
Yeah,
maybe 20 minutes or so from me. But
so
yeah,
cool.
it's awesome. It's funny because like it's such a Colorado institution. This is where I say like they do shit that's so relatable. The Casa Bonita episode was one
Yeah.
of those things where every kid that grew up in Colorado was like, oh man, Casa Bonita. Like I was always I took Spanish classes for all of middle school and high school, and they were
Mm.
always like, and at the end of the year, we'll take everybody to Casa Bonita. And it was like my year never got to go. It was always the year ahead of us. And then by the
Oh,
time it got to us, they were like, oh, yeah, we're not doing that this year. So I feel like for
that
years, I was
sucks.
screwed out of a trip to Casa Bonita.
Yeah.
And then finally I went when I was like maybe, like after college. And I just was like,
Yeah.
this is everything I wanted it to be. But that was back in the days when it was like real shitty. So being able to go again now, it's like, you just go, oh man, look how much love they've put into this. And they're not gonna make their money back on this necessarily,
No,
but
it's a
they don't
passion
care.
project.
Yeah, exactly. And
Yeah.
what a
I
cool
need to go.
thing to do. Yeah, it's so
See, I
awesome.
never knew it was real until all the reports of them
Yeah,
opening. I just assumed it was this
totally.
like why would a Mexican restaurant have a roller coaster? You know what I
Right.
mean? It was just seemed
It's like
incredibly
why are there
fictitious.
cliff divers? Why is there Black Bart's cave? Like none of this makes any sense. This is
Yeah.
probably something they made up. So many people thought that. I remember like when I was in college, a bunch of my friends were like, well, that's not a real place. It's like, no, it's a real place. Like it's just the kind of thing of no one believes it's real. And then you get here and you step foot inside and it is exactly as presented in the show. And it's just amazing to experience that. It feels like walking into a South Park episode in the best
That's
possible
so
way.
sick.
It's so cool. So cool.
Do you have a favorite episode off the top of your head, just like without looking up anything? Like what comes to mind? I mean, I know you've got the Casa Bonita shirt on.
Right. I have there's a
But
bunch.
yeah.
I really love I remember loving the Chimpokomon episode a lot.
Oh yeah.
I loved Make Love Not Warcraft was a great one.
Yes.
Just an absolute fantastic. And then that entire season where they like introduced PC Principle and then they had where everything was
That's
an
right.
ad. I know a lot of people were
And the
bitching about
PC
that season.
babies and
Yeah, but I loved that season. I thought the whole thing with everything being an ad and ads that follow you around, and the entire commentary on like
yeah.
online ads. as someone who does a lot of digital advertising and has to deal with algorithms and all that shit all the time, I loved that. So I think those are like,
that rules.
you know, some old school ones, some newer ones, like, but yeah, those are the ones that always come to mind. I also love the Lord of the Rings, the Return of the Two Towers.
To the
that's
Return of the Fellowship of the Two Towers or something. Yeah.
Such a, that was a classic one for me, where it was like, it hit like and at like Lord of the Rings fever time. Yeah. Do you have faves?
Yeah, I think I really love Chicken Lover or Chicken Fucker, whatever. I love Officer Bob Brady, who sadly is no longer in the show. But I just think that's such a great episode, especially with like the absurdity of this guy who's killing chickens to teach Officer Bob Brady to read. Like, I think that's like really, like, that to me sums up Matt and Trey's like third act. Like, yeah, I really love that one. That one definitely comes to mind at the top of my head. I mean, I love the Cartman's mom's dirty.
Oh my God. Phenomenal. That's like top
tier. And then like the retconning. And obviously Scott Tenorman must die. Like, there's so many great ones. I don't know.
Yes. Scott Tenorman, I think, is like, that is like such a key episode. And I remember them even saying like, this was the moment that Cartman became Cartman, you know?
Totally. Yeah. His plan is executed. Yeah. I think that's definitely one. And I also love like one of the later ones, the medicinal fried chicken with
God, so good.
With the dads like microwaving their testicles to smoke weed, which
that medicinal fried chicken is so accurate of what happened in Colorado when weed became legal.
Yeah,
like just within
like the second 5 blocks, state, right? After California.
People were medicinally, like, it was becoming medicinally legal, and then Colorado was the first state to make it just recreational. Like, you could just buy weed, go to the store and buy weed, and it was so funny because it was like, the weed store became like the Spirit Halloween, where it was like every closed like gas station or fast food place or whatever just became a dispensary like overnight. And I mean, within like 5 blocks of my house, there's like 10 dispensaries. So it just became this thing where Cartman's favorite KFC becomes a dispensary. I was like, oh my God, so accurate.
This is, yeah.
It was just like,
perfect.
I
love it. I'm literally going to go watch some straight after this.
Nice.
I need to do my catch up now. This has inspired me big time.
Nice. That's so awesome. Well, this has just been so great. Angus, do you want to tell people where they can find you and follow you and all that?
I have a podcast with someone who spoke to you recently. It's called Hey Fam. It's pretty much this, except with another co-host. It's great. If you like this, you will love that. I'm on Letterboxd. My name on there is Chimichangas. I'm pretty sure I learned the word chimichangas from South Park too, with Chimichangas. I'm pretty sure. It's very influential. Yeah, and you know, maybe we can flip this and we can talk about The Matrix, where my town was featured in 1999 in a prominent film.
Love it. I'm all about it. Well, you know, if you like this video, leave a like, leave a comment, subscribe, follow all the stuff. I'll put all of our social links in the show notes. And thank you so much for watching, and we'll catch you in the next one.